So first and foremost, welcome, Tanya. How are you finding yourself in this, shall I say, unprecedented times?
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. This is a first for Radian and a first for us also to attend virtually Radian Summit. Nice background, first and foremost.
Thank you.
How did the pandemic affect us? As you can see, I'm actually working from home. We have some members of Cantilan Bank, especially those that are working in the headquarters, that are able to work from home.
Mhm.
That's actually thanks to Oradian in that sense. So we were in a position to have the flexibility to allow some of our headquarters personnel to actually stay in their places of residence and just log in online and then still have access to their reports for their office needs. So of course, we're not talking about branch personnel, but for HQ personnel, they're able to do their work through work from home.
That's good news in this kind of a bad situation. What I wanted to obviously welcome you to this let's call it a webinar, although we want to call it a virtual summit. And just a reminder to everyone in some of the rules. We You can ask Tanya as a panelist here. Obviously, everyone participating. We had large interest in this and high interest. We were about 100 over 100 people registered. If you have any questions for Tanya on the topic or even for me, please write it in the Q&A section at the bottom. You can do that, or you can even have the chat option that some of you already used. So feel free to just obviously ask questions, and we'll try to answer it at the end. But the sooner you ask questions, I'm sure the better it is, and we can answer it, and we can find time for it. Tanya, just for your reference, we have a lot of interest from rural banks in the Philippines, which is what we expected and hoped for for this talk, but also obviously from co-ops and MFIs and MFBs as well. So we are very happy to have you here and share your experiences and knowledge with us. Let's take a step back, maybe, Tanya, and I'm sure a lot of our participants here know, but maybe give us a bit more insights about Canton itself. Who do you service? What kind of bank is it? What is your target? And you have the slides here. Perfect.
Okay, so I'd like to just welcome everybody, of course, and again, thank you to Aradian for hosting this. So for the members of our audience who want to know a little bit about Cantilan Bank, we are a rural bank that has been engaged in community banking services for the past 40 years. We have a total network of 46 branches and branch lights spread out strategically across 12 provinces in Mindanao and the Visayas, and we serve over 100 underbanked and underserved communities. So that's a little bit about us, and this is again familiar to a lot of our colleagues in the rural banking industry. So we are working within this type of environment where there's a lot still that needs to improve when it comes to financial inclusion. So that is one of the missions of Cantilan Bank. We want to be a community bank that can help the underbanked and the underserved by providing more of these services and quicker access and more reliable services as well. So that's a little bit of an intro on us. Would you like to proceed to your other questions, or should we talk a little bit more about where we started on our journey with Oradian?
Sorry, I was muted. We're in a bit of a free flow, but more than happy to continue on this and on Cantilan. Interesting number that you have there, 45% to say of the towns in Mindanao are unbanked. What do you refer as to an unbanked town? Oh, now you're muted. Sorry.
An unbanked town is a town that exactly has zero banks
Hmm.
there servicing it. So again, this is not a surprise for our rural banking colleagues, but it's become more, shall we say, common now to be underbanked or underserved. But in the case of Mindanao, we still have communities that do not have any other financial service provider or a banking institution that's servicing their financial needs. So a lot of these areas, we are actively seeking them out and providing these types of services.
Excellent. And so obviously, as one can imagine, the digital aspect here helps, and Cantilan, in our eyes, and obviously is I would say forerunner in digitalization. When did you, as a bank, realize that this is something you have to work on? That this is one of your obviously priorities, the digital aspect, the digitalization of your bank. Can you pinpoint a time in history for that?
Mm, sure. We do have experience in pioneering a lot of these new products and digital. I would say that I wanted to share with the rest of our colleagues. There was a time when we participated as a pioneer in GCash back in 2006. So GCash is first in the world, in fact, for using SMS and mobile to transfer funds, savings account, or even and do your repayments by loan. So we were doing that as early as 2006. But when it comes to our digital transformation now with the technologies that we're talking about, like cloud, um, that journey began in 2013. So in 2013, what was critical was the issuance of the BSP circular on cloud. And that was, again, that's something that prompted a lot of institutions to question, okay, are we ready? Are we ready in terms of our risk management frameworks within the bank? Do we have the mechanisms in place that would allow us to plan to actually implement the technologies that are being discussed in that circular? So paramount in that circular is the BSP's message that they wanted to encourage rural banks in particular to embrace cloud as one of the most useful technologies that would bring about competitiveness and could serve as a leveler of sorts. Because at that point in time in 2013, not a lot of rural banks had on-premise core banking systems because it was just way too expensive, and there was no ability actually to subscribe to cloud-based services. So the enabling regulations were there, but the institutions themselves, it took some time for us to get to a point where we knew where we could use those regulations. So in Cantilan Bank's case, we were trying to get ready since 2013, and then in 2015, we did an IT risk assessment and started doing our IT strategic planning as required by the regulations of the BSP. And from there, we decided to take the leap. By 2016, we had met Oradian at that point in time and other vendors who had just come into the space here in the Philippines. And we started our journey from there. I wanted to share this quick slide just for the benefit of all the participants as well as Nicholas, Nicola. And this just shows the total number of banking offices all over the Philippines, about more than 12,000 banking offices nationwide, combined with the universal commercial banks, thrift banks, rural banks, and co-ops. But rural banks have 2,500 branches all in all. So you can see that the brick and mortar presence of rural banks, okay, it helps when it comes to providing reach, but in terms of addressing accessibility, that's a different thing altogether. So those are the things that are complicating the financial inclusion challenge here in the Philippines.
Mhm. Awesome. You mentioned Oradian and getting involved with. How did this first interaction come? Obviously, you mentioned the BSP circular, and then you prioritizing on the cloud side there, and then Oradian comes in picture. I know ADB was involved as well, but how did the first contact happen, and then how did your selecting process go in terms of choosing the right core banking provider?
Good question. Well, in our IT strategic plan, we considered technology as the key driver really for uh, improving financial inclusion and really leveling the playing field, providing fair access to rural banks. Now we had a technology that could help us manage our risks better. So not just IT risks, the different types of risks, including operational risks, regulatory risks as well. And it's not to say that we eliminated them, but in our 2015 plan, we knew that we would be better off using cloud-based technology to manage our IT risks. And when we planned that out, we had um, partnered with the ADB in 2016. And at that time, we had also met Oradian and other providers who had just, again, come into the Philippines market because of the enabling regulations set by the BSP. So for our digital transformation journey, we knew that we needed to solve our problems with new technology. We could not wait and figure out how to plan, how to grow together with our old legacy and on-premise solutions. We knew we needed a new technology,
Mhm.
and that meant changing our business processes, the culture within Cantilan Bank, and also changing the customer experience down the line. Um, so our journey with Oradian and the ADB was really important because again there were many risks involved at that point in time. In 2016 December, Cantilan Bank received BSP's conditional approval. So we were the first bank in the Philippines to receive conditional approval from the BSP to use cloud-based core banking technology in December of 2016. So once we got that green light and we would work with the BSP in the BSP sandbox, they would monitor what we were doing. Um, that's when things started moving a little bit faster. So it's really important for me to say here that partnership is key. Our partnership with Radian, the BSP, and ADB, in the sense that we were all in this together, learning, trying to learn what it would mean for the industry. So we found ourselves again starting our journey in 2016 with a conditional approval, and then started our pilot in the BSP sandbox. And again, because we were the first, we were very careful in really understanding what is it that the BSP needs us to look out for. And the same for us, we had our own internal policies. What should we be looking at? So in 2018, we did a parallel run where we migrated all of our branches and already tested ATM integration. At the time, we already had ATMs since 2011. And we needed to put investments in network technology because again we were spread out across 12 provinces. We needed to make sure that if we were going to be dependent on a cloud-based core banking system, we needed to have a network and security solution that can support that, meaning all 46 of our branches and branch sites should be able to access
Mhm.
InstaFin. So we made a lot of these investments during that period. And then until finally in January, we received the final approval from the BSP.
And for your let's say fellow rural banks in the Philippines, like the whole process that you mapped out here, the conditional approval, the sandboxing, how uh, how burdensome and how heavy was it for you, and in terms of what you expected it to be beforehand?
Sorry, I had to disappear there. I had to plug in my laptop, otherwise I'd be gone.
No worries.
Okay, could you repeat the question again?
Yes, no, the process that you mapped out, the conditional approval, the sandboxing, with BSP particularly, who was obviously prioritizing this, but still, how burdensome was it for you with regards to the expectations that you had? Like just for reference to your fellow rural bankers, to see if they want to go through the same process, how what are they dealing with basically?
Okay. Well, my advice to the other rural banks, in terms of our experience, it's a little bit different in the sense that nobody had done it before. So in the period of 2016, when we had been already in talks and discussion with the BSP, not overly formal. It was always at the Rural Bankers Association conferences, the RBAP conferences, where we had, the opportunity to interface with the BSP. So at the time, when the 2013 BSP circular was released, we took probably 3 years to invest in ensuring that we have our IT risk management framework set in place. We had our policies set in place. That gave us time really to more effectively interact with the regulator and understand that when they released that circular in 2013, they meant it really as an enabling framework, and they provided all the information that a bank would need to be set in place for using such a technology as cloud. So by the end of 2016, we had already informed them, the BSP, okay, we're very much interested in taking the next step. At that point in mind, I think our other rural banking colleagues would remember, most of everyone would say at that time in 2016 that cloud was not allowed. And again, we just took it to the BSP and asked them, well, we read your circular and it pretty much says there that you're encouraging the use of cloud. So definitively, could you answer that question? Are we allowed to use cloud, especially for core banking? And their answer was yes. And how soon do you want to do it? So we started moving the ball with a little bit of hesitance at first. So it took a little while for us to get ready. There is a cloud questionnaire that one has to answer. A bank has to be able to answer that. So mind you, in 2016, no one had done it before. So we were just filling it up together with some of your colleagues, Nicola, in Oradian. And then we were collaborating with the BSP in terms of the next steps. So we didn't actually know what step 2 and step 3 was. When we got to step 1, we just kept asking, what's next? What's next? And so in terms of our journey, as you can see, preparing for the BSP conditional approval, because we were the first, took a very long time. We had been investing in our IT risk management framework since 2013, since the release of the circular. So that's 3 years right there. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, a lot of our rural bank colleagues have, they've known about this circular for a long time and they've had more time to prepare. So it'd be quite easy for them, I would say, to prepare. For us, it took us maybe just to fill out the cloud questionnaire, maybe 3 months, 4 months, just the questionnaire itself. But to prepare for it took a little bit longer. So I would say that a rural bank has to be prepared when it comes to getting the inputs from their IT auditors, their internal IT auditors, their compliance officers, not just their IT specialists or the members of their IT staff. So there is a lot of preparation work. But having said that, the BSP circular has everything that you need to know regarding the preparation. So it's just a matter now of just prioritizing it.
So it's I believe it's a burdensome project, but you were in a way on a forerunner in this, and
I,
hopefully you made it easier for the real banks to come.
I think that's what should happen
Mm-hmm.
soon. So we were a bit of a guinea pig. So yes, it was a little bit difficult at the beginning, not really burdensome in that sense, because we needed to be very aware of the risk, and the BSP needed to be assured, as well as the regulator, that the rural bank knows the risk that they're getting into. So it
Absolutely.
wasn't, I don't view it as burdensome. I viewed it really as a necessity. It's a necessary caution that needed to take place.
After all,
So
that's
it was important for us to be in the BSP sandbox.
yeah, that's the regulator's job in the first place, right?
Hmm.
To protect the consumers, but then as well, and the banks and all the and eliminate
Yes.
all the risks whenever possible. Um, let's come to Arabian at this point. You mentioned at that time, because of the circular, because of the BSP uh, openness to cloud, you had suddenly all these providers in the Philippines, and you went with Arabian, and you are still with Arabian, thankfully. How did this happen? How did the selection process go there? Um,
Okay.
yeah.
I think I'm going to end up selling the Circular 808, the BSP Circular 808 a lot, because again, it provided us a lot of clues moving forward. And all our discussions with the BSP at the beginning really revolved around them asking us, okay, what do you have in place in your framework, in your policy framework? Um, and you really need to make sure that you have the following things. So if you want to engage in outsourced cloud uh, services, especially for your core banking, I would say pay attention to the vendor management policy. So there are regulations on vendor management, including, of course, how to do vendor selection, but that is left up to the bank. So there are regulations about how a bank should have its own internal vendor management policy. So at the time in 2016, we had that already. So this is what I was talking about, where we had to get ready from 2013 to 16 to have the enabling policies internally to Cantilan Bank, so that we could understand, okay, if the regulations state cloud is allowed, what do you need to do? Make sure that you actually go through your internal policies for vendor management and selection. You have to have criteria. You have to do an RFP, or a request for proposal, and compare them. You have to have a minimum number of vendors. You can't just say, I saw a Radian and that's it. I'm not going to compare it to any other vendor. Um, there are clear objectives there for banks. And when you do end up with some options that you came up with as a bank, you have a short list. As we did, we came up with a short list of 5 vendors. So we went through the process of doing RFP. It was a lengthy process. And you have to do a lot of cost benefit analysis per vendor. So again, this one is highly customized in terms of experience, but the guidelines are there in the circular. And it should really help you when it comes to cloud outsourcing, vendor management, vendor selection. And this includes evaluating on an annual basis your vendor's performance. So I would say that a lot of our colleagues there in the rural banking industry, um, now are probably hopefully they understand that they really have to bring their compliance officers, their internal IT auditors to the table when it comes to these types of projects. It's not just an IT project. You have to bring in other members of your bank to help understand what you need to do, even for vendor selection.
Mhm. So it's very important to say it's not, which is something I think a lot of people assume, it's not just an IT project. But speaking of not just an IT project and being part of an obviously larger organization, in the whole process, well, deciding on the priorities, deciding on cloud, and then all afterwards choosing Oridian within the organization, for you internally, what were the major challenges as well in terms of, blockers? Often it's mentioned, is something we talk a lot with our clients as well and potential clients, is change management is something obviously crucial in organizations as well. What would you single out as some of the blockers or challenges that you remember now in the selection and onboarding, let's say, process?
Sure. Okay. So again, at the time when we were doing vendor selection, we had to do cost benefit analysis. So what I'm showing in front of you now is one of the things that we were looking at. So one of the factors that we wanted to ensure that this new technology was going to help us with was we needed the technology to give us an edge in the market. We needed to stay relevant, meaning we needed new technology to solve problems that we were facing then, but we knew that there would be different problems coming in the future. So we needed to stay relevant. we needed scale as well. Our on-premise solution at the time, one of the main reasons why we wanted to move to cloud was particularly for this benefit. Having an on-premise core banking system meant that Cantilan Bank had to continuously devote resources and capital to building and maintaining its data center. Not just one. In the circular, you need to at least have two, your primary one and then your disaster recovery one. So again, this was the main reason, one of the main reasons why we had to move to cloud. There was no way that we could foresee that Cantilan would continuously have the ability, the resources to maintain a data center. If we wanted to grow in terms of our network, that meant our core banking had to support that. And to support a core banking on premise meant you had to have a data center that would have to physically have to fit the servers that you need. Because if you want to grow, you obviously have to put servers. We were not, we're not an IT company. We're not a software company. We're a bank. We do banking, and we will leave the IT to the IT professionals. So this is one of the main benefits that we were looking for. If we wanted to open a branch at that time, it would take us roughly 6 to 9 months just to prepare the IT side, because we had to compute again by the time we would have X number of branches. How many servers do we need to support our core banking needs? That was just too much already, and we saw that we would hit a particular ceiling that we could not grow beyond that with the technology that we used to have, the legacy core banking system. So scale is one important benefit. Responsiveness to customer needs. This is basically tied to how responsive we were, and how we can provide more access in newer places that were unbanked. And we needed to be there quicker. We also wanted to look at multi-channel capabilities. So we knew that being cloud enabled meant that our future could mean that we could do API integration. So I'll leave it at that in terms of the benefits. Sorry, there's a few more. So again, when it comes to risk management, I mentioned this already. Because we're located in Mindanao, this is also applicable to the rest of the rural banks outside of Mindanao. We face particular geohazard risks. Here in Cantilan, we are on the eastern coast of Mindanao, facing the Pacific. We're prone to earthquakes. We're prone to, well, we don't really get hit by typhoons, but we do get really heavy rain. We could get flooded. In the past, when we had our own on-premise core banking solution that we were running out of our data center and our disaster recovery center, we had to think about that. We had to think about what would happen if there was an earthquake and the data center just collapsed. What would happen to the way we would deliver banking if there was a typhoon that flooded the data center? Would we really be able to go and start our disaster recovery center just like that in like 30 minutes? That was just way too much for us. And so we tried to balance again the benefits that we were looking for. So when we were looking for vendors, we weighed, okay, we need these particular benefits. Who is best placed to provide us these types of benefits? In terms of the challenges, as you were discussing earlier, at the time, there was a risk perception, or a perception rather, that cloud was inherently riskier and less secure. Again, it's a perception. Cloud is not going to solve and eliminate risk. It will introduce a different risk. Your old risks will be probably something that you won't have to manage in the same way. We do have geohazard risks, but they are not facing us. They are not connected or localized to the town of Cantilan. We manage it through Oradian because they're obviously located in Europe. So they have their own risks there. In our case, change management definitely was a challenge. This is my advice really to the rest of the rural banks and our other colleagues in the MFI industry. You need to involve all levels within your organization. This is not an IT project. Please don't tell your poor IT guy this is your project and then forget about it. No, we had to involve the board, the senior management, the branch officers, and all the staff at the branches, even in headquarters as well.
That's
Yeah, so these were some of the main challenges. Business process mapping was also very critical and quite challenging because it's something that you have to keep doing. Um, and there were challenges with third party integration for us in particular because we were already doing ATMs as early as 2011. So it wasn't just a matter of, oh, we're shifting to a new core banking system. From our old one, we're going to Oradian. No, we had to bring, our ATM systems with us and figure out, okay, Oradian, how do we integrate this? And then now in 2020, we moved to BankNet. We are one of the newest members of BankNet, and we were successful in integrating that with, thanks, of course, to Oradian.
perfect. That's actually one other reminder to all our participants. There's quite a few right now. That please feel free to ask questions directly to Tanya in the Q&A section or in the chat. I see there's quite activity at the moment. One question from Miss Garzuta was actually what you just answered, Tanya, which was great. It was what are the challenges experienced by Cantilan in migrating from on-premise to cloud? Thank you for preemptively answering this. I think this was really answered in a good way. But you mentioned growth, and then when you wanted to focus, that you said when you thought about on-premise, due to all the challenges and risks, that you couldn't consider really growth from Cantilan. But since now you have a cloud-based core banking system, obviously with Aradian, how can you focus on growth and your business priorities? As you said very correctly, we are a bank, we are not a software or IT company. And how did this result in, maybe even compared to your expectations, or in the last 2 years plus that you use the user Radian?
Okay. Again, what we wanted as a benefit from this system was its ability to give us multi-channel capabilities. Again, cloud is the enabling technology, and we really knew that in our plan, in our IT strategic plan that we wrote in 2015 and just keep enhancing. We needed to ensure that our core banking was already future proof in the sense that it would provide us the flexibility to integrate with third parties through APIs. And again, some of those things are, we didn't arrive at those decisions overnight. We kept reading a lot about, okay, what other technologies and capabilities can we get leveraging off of the cloud-based core banking system that would translate towards better services. So that was always key in our mind. The cloud-based core banking system, InstaFin, okay, it's not going to directly impact your clients because your clients actually will not know unless you didn't have, of course, unless you didn't have a core banking system that you're replacing it with. In that case, of course, that's a big change. But if you already had a previous one and you're moving to this one, they won't necessarily feel it. And that is something that you might even want to aspire for. They won't necessarily feel it because they actually shouldn't care that it's cloud, right? The whole point of it is the benefit that you get with what you can do with the API integration and the other channels and services that you could do. And I wanted to point out one more thing in terms of our discussion about challenges. So we have, I have another slide here that talks about what we needed. We knew from the start, but it didn't really sink in. So other rural banks, this is something you really definitely need to manage. So while we were looking at replacing on-premise technology with cloud-based and managing that transition from a technology point of view, we have to pay attention to managing the shift between CapEx and OpEx. So you'll know more about this. Again, try to involve really your finance and accounting um, people in these types of decisions. Be prepared for them. In the past, again, because we had a larger um, requirement. We had a data center that we needed to um, keep improving and upgrading and maintaining, and also our disaster recovery site. That meant a lot of capex to us,
Mhm.
but we treat it differently, obviously, versus opex. Now, what does that mean now on an organization's liquidity? And that's something that I would say you have to understand how to manage moving forward, and the rate of change um, internally as well. How quickly can your team have the ability to start interfacing with Oradian? So while Oradian is our strategic technology partner, you can't just leave those decisions, obviously, to your core your core provider.
Yeah.
Your organization, your capabilities, your skills as a bank, you also need to upgrade that. Not to say that they're the ones managing the technology, but you need to be in a position where you can understand where you want to be in the near future, the midterm, and the long term, what technologies you need to put into place, and how your people need to adjust to that. This to us is one of the biggest challenges. So prepare for it through a lot of education, a lot of training. And I know that Oradian is there to support those needs as well, education and training. So you just need to make sure that all parts of your business, including your IT, need to be upgraded in terms of their skills.
Perfect. Speaking of impact, you mentioned that obviously your end clients wouldn't notice, for example, if you're changing your if you're migrating. But what about products, and especially focusing on digital products? Um, just in terms of from Cantilan perspective, do you how do you see the future of digitalization? How can this and digital products that you can offer? That's one part of the question. And how does this plug into your into InstaFin, obviously into the current core banking system? And then also, what do you see from let's say the demand side? What is the demand with your end clients for this, let's say, cutting edge digital products?
Okay, let me share a little bit about where we are now and where we intend to be, and what that means also with the way we aligned ourselves with the BSP strategic roadmap for digital payments. So let me just begin with this one. So this is our most recent project together with Oradian. We were able to shift our ATM network connection. So in the past, we were integrated to just a network aggregator. So in this case, it was NationLink. But we knew that our plans were bigger than that, and we needed to have the network effect. So we went directly with BankNet, and BankNet has a total of 71 million cardholders, about 27,000 ATMs, a network of 450,000 POS terminals in the Philippines to date. So we've just joined the largest network in the Philippines, and it's thanks to, again, that flexibility of the core banking system that you're able to integrate it through APIs. Um, because we did that now, it's been in our plans for a while. There was the pandemic affected us greatly when it came to this project, but we actually did it in time still, despite the pandemic. But there were some changes. When I told you earlier about the risk perception, that there was a perception that cloud is inherently more risky, BankNet shared that risk perception at the beginning. But because of the pandemic, we were able to really discuss with them that, we we are the first bank here in the Philippines that got approval from the BSP to start using cloud-based core banking. We're also using cloud-based network and security solutions, but BankNet was, you know, their part of their requirements originally was you had to have on-premise network solutions to connect to BankNet, and so we had to do a lot of changes when it came to that. And thankfully, they allowed us to do it. So we also became the first member of BankNet that was allowed to use a cloud-based connection. So I point this out because it's a way for um, the rest of our rural bank colleagues to understand the enabling nature of cloud. It allows you to do a lot of things with smaller resources. Um,
Hmm.
so what does this mean for us? This is what it means for us. These are our new ATMs. It allows us to have more ATMs in more of our branches. We have POS devices that function as mini ATMs. We have all of these features at those locations, but more importantly, our debit cards can now be used in hundreds of thousands of terminals owned by other BankNet banks. So that's one of the main things that we were looking to do. And we did it already this year. We just launched in September. And now we're moving towards another um, project using API integration. We want to have mobile banking, and we're almost there. And again, with the help of Oradian, that's something that will be a reality by January of 2021. So this is something that we're doing to be aligned with the BSP's um, strategic roadmap. And I'll show you this, which was just shared recently by the BSP. So the BSP does annual surveys. In 2019, only 1% of the country's retail transactions were conducted in digital. 1%. This was just last year, 2019.
Hmm.
At the end of 2020, because of the pandemic, which really pushed and drove people to use digital, your question was on the demand side. This is the demand side now. Because of the pandemic, there was such a demand for being able to access financial services through digital channels. By the end of the year 2020, this year, we will already have 20 or almost 30% of our total retail transaction volumes in the country become digital.
Oh.
That's just in the space of 1 year. From 1% in 2019, it'll become 20 to 30% by the end of this year. So the BSP foresees that by the end of 2023, 50% of total retail transactions will be digital, and 70% of Filipino adults will be financially included, meaning they will have at some point a digital account, either at a bank, hopefully at a rural bank, at an MFI. So this is where I would again encourage the rest of the rural banks and the MFIs, align yourselves also with these strategies and figure out what does that mean on your end? What do you need to have in place aside from the technology? You need to have the skills. You need to have the resources to be able to reach that goal. And you need to do it fast because, again, we're not the only ones seeing this as opportunity. So we are definitely well placed as an industry because we are in places where there are hardly any banks or any financial institutions. There is one more slide that I'd like to share with the rest,
Please do. Yeah.
and it is something that I think would interest. Um, let's see. Oop, sorry. Okay, there it is. Why digital? Again, you saw the roadmap earlier. These are some of the things we're facing right now. Earlier, you saw 71% of Filipino adults do not have a bank account. But the BSP plans by the end of 2023 that 70% of Filipino adults will have a bank account. So you must ask yourself, how do you position your bank to be one of the enablers of financial inclusion, especially if you look at this one, where 69% of Filipino adults own a mobile phone, and out of the unbanked, 7 out of 10 own a mobile phone. So there are opportunities there, and we have to do them fast, and we have to do them as an industry together. Yep.
That's a great point. I think that the digital transactions would happen anyways. It's just that the whole pandemic this speeded up incredibly fast, of course, for obvious reasons. And then it's good to be well positioned in this, as you said. That was kind of also where I was going with my next question. Let's we kind of slowly have to close down. We're going to answer a few questions. One more reminder: if you want to ask Tanya something directly, this is the time, because no one better to probably answer this for you if you have same concerns within your financial institution. But with respect to COVID, except the increase in digital payments and good thing to be ready, how did you see your the business side? We talked about this at the beginning, working from home and all the challenges that brings it. But how did you, what did you notice on the business side? Was it, for example, some of our other uh, partners that we talked to saw an increase in non-performing loans. They have issues with collecting. Uh, how do you see that?
Yes, for Cantilan Bank, well, we do have a lot of branches and branch lights, and then we have, staff in those branches. There were, you know, similar challenges to the other rural banks. We could not collect as effectively as we used to.
Mhm.
You would have clients that would be unable to physically come to the branch. You would have our account officers or our credit officers unable to go on field because of certain restrictions, travel restrictions, because of the lockdowns, the community quarantines. So of course that made a difference in our ability to collect. What was critical for us was, again, our ability still to communicate to our clients that, okay, if they can find their way to the branch, we would have a place where they can be transacting in a safe manner. And we would be available, we would be reliable. We didn't stop because of the pandemic. And I think that was very a critical signal to send to the market. But I think a lot of you have seen the opportunities there for digital. What would it mean if we already have a digital channel where they could start doing their loan repayments um, through mobile app, and so on and so forth? Yeah.
Perfect. Um, yeah, I would like to address a few questions. We have a few questions scattered through the Q&A and the chat box here on the side. Tanya, I can read them for you, and then we can see how to address them best. So I think the first one we answered what I mentioned before, the challenges Cantilan experienced migrating from on-premise to cloud. But the second question is from Mr. Magalong here. He's asking, when you moved from legacy to cloud, where all the data migrated successfully? This is something probably people are wondering.
Okay, so those two questions are, of course, connected. In our experience, we had not just one legacy core banking system that we were dealing with in 2016. Some of our branches, which were located in more remote communities, had a legacy system that what was different from our core banking. What do I mean? We had other legacy systems. We had three, in fact. And why was that? Because of the locations of some of these branches, we were unable to provide the necessary infrastructure that would support our old core banking system. Our old core banking system, just like many of these types of systems, had to rely on a very expensive infrastructure called IPVPN. It was just not available in other towns and communities. So right now with Instafin, obviously what you need is an internet connection. You don't need an expensive IPVPN connection. So this is where the flexibility would come in. We can go to a more remote community as long as it has internet. We can set up a branch or a branch light. So again, what were the challenges for us? Uh, your question, were all the data migrated successfully? So my answer is yes, including not just our main core banking system, but our two other legacy systems that we were keeping in some branches. So at that time, when we were not on Oradian yet, there were branches of ours that we were operating who were offline just because they didn't have IPVPN, like Globe or PLDT or Smart just didn't offer that. So they were actually offline. So we had to make sure that we prepared the data from those other systems and migrated them into Instafin. So the answer to that question is yes. That means that all 46 of our branches and branch lights were migrated with their data, of course. And in terms of the challenges, question of Rita, that's, I mean, you can just imagine the amount of work that had to go into planning how to migrate from one system and then migrate from two to migrate from three legacy systems. So we had to do it, of course, in a very planned and scheduled manner. So we first onboarded the ones that were on our core banking system that was online. I mean, our previous one. And then after that, we onboarded the others because there were maybe a few, three branches that were using an even older system. Okay, so by 2019, we were migrated. All the branches were migrated and online.
That's pretty sounds pretty challenging. So if there is some other potential clients there that they have to replace only one or two core legacy systems, maybe that's encouraging for them because if you could do it, they can do it probably too. Uh,
Yes.
so I mean, this is gonna be a pretty direct and honest question. You know, in your opinion, uh, can another rural bank in the long term or in the short term as well move forward without a cloud, considering the market and stuff? What is, I mean, what is your opinion? Clearly, you decided for Cantilan, but what is your opinion on, because we know there is consolidation in the market. Every year there is less and less rural banks in the Philippines. Their numbers of branches are increasing, which obviously uh, points the direction of market consolidation. If you're a rural bank active in obviously your area, is there an alternative to a cloud core banking system like Instafin for you?
You mean an alternative cloud-based system as well, or do you mean as opposed to an
No,
alternative to on-premise?
yeah, like could you go without cloud basically? Would you
Oh,
be
definitely no. We would. I mean, that would be a step backward, I would say. And again, our move towards the cloud was an investment on our part in future-proofing our company. And this new technology we knew was going to be an enabler for other new technologies. We simply could not take advantage of the opportunities that exist in the market if we don't have that flexibility and that agility and the scale that we need to support our plans. So that's basically my answer to that question. Is there a benefit to not being on cloud? I don't see it. I don't see us going back to on premise, just because there's no way we can grow with it. Again, bearing in mind I'm talking about Cantilan Bank, but it might be generic enough to be applicable to other rural banks. Because again, the circular 808 requires us to have, if you have a data center, that's one is not enough.
Mhm.
If you're housing your core banking there, you need at least two data centers. So
Which
that means investments in creating buildings
uh,
that are earthquake proof, typhoon proof, fire proof, flood proof. I don't know if you guys have the budget for that. Definitely, we do not.
in different
And
locations and everything.
in different locations, yeah. And you need to have technology that would allow you to, if your primary data center goes offline, your disaster recovery one or your secondary one should kick in a few seconds. There was just no way we could do that. Again, because of the cost of cloud technology, hopefully becoming lower and more friendly, that's something that we feel is something to look forward to in the future. And it should be easier now at this point in time for organizations like you to think about cloud technology.
Perfect. Um, there's a lot of questions actually. Now I got a bit caught by surprise that we're running out of time, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna try to cover.
I see a lot.
I'm gonna try to cover as much as possible. There's a lot of comments from people in the chat saying thank you for clarifying this is not just an IT project for IT guys only,
Yeah.
but a cross organizational one. Um,
Oh,
but some of the original questions from
okay.
Garsuta and Mr. Magalong are here. They followed up, and Ms. Garsuta says, in terms of manpower, did you add more personnel during the transition period?
No, we did not. That's the quick question.
That's a
We
good
did not
question.
at all.
We like
Our
questions
project
like,
management team was just the same people that we already had.
but obviously, this is a part of the process that working with Iridian very closely, and that process
Yes.
is very delicate. Ms.
And
Magalong asks, do you have a backup plan in case something happened during migration? May you share the backup?
yes. So during migration, once again, let me just share my screen
Mhm.
to remind you of how long it took us and what we were doing during that period, um, just so you understand it. Okay, with context. Okay, uh, pay attention to 2017 and 2018. In 2017, when we kicked off our project, we started our pilot. When I say pilot, we did not migrate all of our branches at that time. We started with 3, just so we understood, okay, what do we need to improve on how we migrate things. Let's start with 3. Okay, this should have been done before that. This data preparation should have been done this way, and so on. So it was a lot of uh, learnings for us during that period. So what we learned in 2017, we applied in 2018. We migrated all our branches and branch lights to do a parallel run. What does that mean? So your question was, did you have a backup? Yes, 2018 was really a dry run, a rehearsal. So our core banking system at the time, that was the live one,
Mhm.
and Instafin was running in parallel. Okay, so we weren't like we migrated it just one day and then we just cut off the old system. No, we were basically doing our parallel run just to see if we got everything um, correctly, basically during the migration. Um, do a lot of validation. So your internal audit would need to do data validation, as well as compliance, with the help, of course, of IT and finance or accounting. And then we were finally ready to go live. When we went live, that meant turning off our old one. So when it comes to that question, did you have a backup? Yes, we did in that sense. We were not running on the newly migrated Instafin instance um, immediately as we migrated them. We had to do a parallel run.
Mr. Magalong is
Okay.
following up immediately with a question.
Oh no.
How long was
Okay,
the
but
parallel run? It's very short.
sorry,
How?
what's the question? How long was the parallel run?
Yeah.
A few months,
Okay. All
but
right.
only because we were, again, we're fairly large in that sense. We had to deal with 12 different provinces. I mean, our branches were scattered over 12 provinces. So we had to, roll out training by physically going to those branches.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it took a longer time for us. So it's really up to you, the organization. But I do want to take some time to answer this question by an anonymous attendee. What
Mm-hmm.
risk and audit challenges are you experiencing
Perfect.
now
That was my next
that
one.
you're in
Me too.
Instafin? Okay. One interesting thing. Um, because of the pandemic, it forced a lot of organizations to check levels of digitalization that they were in, how much of their processes were automated, um, and internal processes, including risk management and audit. How are you then going to do that if you're prevented from physically doing on site audits. So last year in January 2019 was when we went live on InstaFin, meaning our old system was off already. So we were running live. Um, in the year 2019, even our own internal audit and our own compliance divisions, we're already figuring out how to do off-site audits, how to do off-site compliance testing. So we kept preparing. And then when the pandemic hit, we were not caught by surprise. We just said, okay, some of the internal auditors who don't live here in the town of Cantilan and who work in headquarters, you can actually go home, stay home, and still do your audit, your internal audit. You can maybe report to the branch that's near your residence and still do internal audit, off-site audits of the branches using InstaFin. The same goes for your information security officer and your compliance testing for the compliance officer. So those are some of the challenges that we faced, but we're able to surmount with cloud technology. We have 3 open questions here. What do you propose, Nicola? Which one do we
we
take
can
on?
we can run through them quickly. We have one of
Okay.
general one in the chats. And do you
Mm.
wanna do you wanna continue with the questions if you see them? There maybe the last one is, aside from forming an internal team and policy preparations, how much is the capital investment projection for this project? Hardware engagement,
Um,
administration, and etc.
well, again, it's not anymore a capex
Yeah.
in that sense because we, coming from an on-premise system where we had our data centers and our disaster recovery site, we actually had to figure out, okay, what do we do now with the old servers? um, but having said that, there is some capex involved for us. This is not this might not be the same for you, but again, our particular challenge was we're spread out across 12 provinces in 46 locations. We had 46 offices. So how do we then make sure that we secure the bank's network? How do we effectively manage our network so that everybody will have access to InstaFin as much as possible? So the availability aspect is what we needed to address. And in 2018, we were already putting uh, we were already investing in ensuring that we had the necessary technology. So some of you even alluded to it here. So I may have spoken to you about this, but it's from an anonymous attendee. The question was, is SD1 necessary in your operations?
That's the next.
In Cantilan Bank's operations, yes. So what is SD1? Software Defined Wide Area Network. We needed it as a network solution to effectively manage 46 locations. They all needed to have a secure way of accessing InstaFin. You couldn't just allow anybody to have, oh, just use the data on your phone to access that. Again, that's because of our IT risk management policies, internal, and that's also because of some regulations in the BSP. So that allowed us to effectively manage that. Again, that's not the same as saying that you should have it. I would really advise a lot of you to take on um, a third party to do an IT risk assessment with you and figure out if you're going to do cloud technology, what do you need to have in place to enable that effective and so that you can effectively manage it and the risks from it. 2 last questions.
Yeah. So one the if you maybe we can start from the bottom. This is kind of a wider one, but
Okay.
you covered it in a way. What limitations in your operations are you experiencing now that you're live in InstaFin, like in terms of product, etc.?
What limitations in your operations? Hmm.
Um,
I'm looking at the number of the attendees here, and I see a lot of Cantilan Bank um, participants here, including those that were in our project and currently still in our digital transformation team. I think some of them can answer that, but off the top of my head,
yeah,
uh, limitations.
it's okay. We could any other questions?
Well, you know what? What you know what's difficult now? I think the rural banks are are very well aware of this, how to implement the mandatory grace period
Mhm.
related to Bayanihan 1 and Bayanihan 2. So those were some of the things that we had to deal with. But again, they were challenges, not really limitations, but they were challenges that we had to figure out together with Oradian.
Mhm.
Um, so if I do remember something, I'll make sure I get back to you.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, that's valid. We're way out of time. One more thing is,
Mm.
if you have any questions that we didn't manage to answer that you come up after this, please email us at knowledge@oradian.com. And then if something particularly, we can forward this to Tanya, of course, or some of those questions I'm sure we can answer ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's another question by Cherry here. Said Tanya, a big question. It's about SD1 again.
Mm-hmm.
Is the investment SD1 a one-time expense with same number of branches? Thank you.
Okay, if you are operating on the assumption that you have the same number of branches, you are looking at a combination of hardware expense,
Hmm.
so that's one time, and then for the subscription and the licenses, that's yearly.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Uh,
and SD1 is used at the data center at branches, both. So
mhm.
that's a quick answer. There was a question about that.
Yeah.
Um,
There's one about CAPEX. You talked about CAPEX again a lot.
mm.
Does it include IDS and firewalls as well for you?
Yes, we have. We had to invest in that as well.
Hmm.